The Norman Conquest was not just another event in history, it was a moment that completely reshaped England. It changed who held power, how society was structured, and even how people spoke. The effects were not temporary, they continued for centuries and still influence the English language today. Before the conquest, England was ruled by Anglo-Saxon kings, with Edward the Confessor as the last major ruler before the crisis. Society was relatively stable, and Old English was spoken everywhere, from the king's court to ordinary villages. However, this language was very different from modern English, with complex grammar and many variations across regions. When Edward died without a clear heir, it created confusion and opened the door for conflict. After Edward's death, Harold Godwin's son became king, but his position was immediately challenged. William the Conqueror claimed that he had been promised the throne, while Harold Hardrada also invaded England. Harold managed to defeat Hardrada in the north, but his army was exhausted. Soon after, William invaded from the south, forcing Harold into a second battle that would decide England's future. The Battle of Hastings became the turning point. William's army used better tactics and stronger coordination, while Harold's tired forces struggled to hold their ground. When Harold was killed, the Anglo-Saxon resistance collapsed. This was not just a lost battle, it marked the end of an entire era and the beginning of Norman rule. After winning, William did not try to slowly blend in, he took control firmly and quickly. He replaced the Anglo-Saxon nobles with his own Norman followers and redistributed land to secure loyalty. Rebellions were crushed harshly, especially in the north. The creation of the Domesday Book helped him track land and resources, ensuring tight control over the country. Castles were built across England, not just for defense, but as clear symbols of authority. The Normans introduced a strict feudal system where land determined power. The king stood at the top, followed by nobles, knights, and peasants at the bottom. This system made society more rigid and increased the gap between the ruling class and ordinary people. The Normans controlled wealth and authority, while the native English population had far fewer opportunities. One of the most noticeable changes was in language. The ruling class spoke French, the church used Latin, and the common people continued to speak English. This created a clear divide in society. Language was no longer just a way to communicate, it became a sign of status. If you spoke French, you had power. If you spoke English, you were likely part of the lower class. Over time, English began to absorb thousands of French words, especially in areas linked to power, such as law, government, and culture. Words like court, justice, and government became part of everyday language. At the same time, English grammar became simpler. Complex endings and rules were reduced, making the language easier to use. This change happened naturally as people from different linguistic backgrounds needed a practical way to communicate. By the 12th and 13th centuries, English started to regain importance, but it had changed significantly. This new form, known as Middle English, was a blend of Old English and French influences. It was more flexible and easier to understand. This can be clearly seen in works like the Canterbury Tales, which reflect a language closer to what we recognize today. The Norman Conquest left a lasting impact on England. Politically, it created a stronger and more centralized system of government. Socially, it deepened class divisions. Linguistically, it transformed English into a rich and adaptable language with a wide vocabulary. These changes shaped not only medieval England but also the modern world. In the end, the Norman Conquest was not a smooth or peaceful transition, it was a forceful takeover that changed everything. It disrupted the existing system but also laid the foundation for a stronger state and a more versatile language. Modern English, with all its complexity and diversity, is a direct result of this historical moment.